Great, thanks so much, Umesh. Really happy to be here again with you all today and looking forward to more participation and engagement in today's session. I have to apologise, my allergies are playing up today, so I apologise if I'm sneezing in the middle of my my speaking. Let me just get my screen share happening. Okay. So as Umesh mentioned, the session today is a follow-on from yesterday's session. So we're going to build on what we discussed yesterday, and it's a lot more forward-looking. So it's looking at ways that you can implement the learnings that we talked about yesterday. Now, I will preface at the start that I have tried to shuffle the content around a little bit to add another breakout room exercise following some of the feedback from yesterday. It may mean we are a little short on time for the last exercise, but this was going to be an individual exercise and you will probably need to do some research around this as well. So I will say that I will probably only introduce that exercise in today's session, and then it will give you a framework to go forwards with after this session. So with that in mind, we will be using the workbook again today. So I hope that you all still have access to that from yesterday. If not, I can post the link in the chat, or perhaps someone from the production team could do that if you don't mind. And that will just give us some templates to work through today. We'll see how we go with the link, otherwise I will stop sharing and find that. Okay, so just a quick refresh on what we covered yesterday. So we looked at what some of your motivations for pursuing a career in evaluation may be. And these ranged from things like wanting to improve people's lives, wanting to improve programs and program outcomes, wanting to increase accountability, wanting to be curious and find answers to some of these questions, wanting to use particular approaches. So we heard that there was a real range of reasons that people might want to pursue a career in evaluation. And so we're going to touch on that a little bit more and how that can influence your career pathways. We also talked about the evaluation career landscape, what that looks like, where the career options are, how those options interact with the broader landscape. We also talked about competencies and what some of the skills are that you need to be a successful evaluator. So you will remember that we finished yesterday on that last exercise about applying competencies and really thinking about the combination of skills that you need. And then today we'll be moving on to look at how you can gain some of those skills that we talked about and how you can plan your career through evaluation. So that's where we're headed today. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment so that I can get the link for the workbook for you all. Okay, so I'm pasting the link in the chat. Just a reminder that you can't edit that document online. You will have to download a copy from the file tab. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, I hope that you can all see this okay. Please do let me know if there's any technical glitches with the share screen. But with that in mind, in terms of what we covered yesterday and where we're moving to today, we will jump straight into some of the content. So this first module today is really looking at building technical knowledge and skills, what that looks like, how you can go about it, those kinds of questions. So firstly, in terms of education and certification. So I think one of the questions that comes up quite a lot around evaluation is if you have to have an evaluation specific degree. And often that is not required for a lot of jobs. This may shift into the future as evaluation courses become more available. But at this stage, it seems like generally there's a requirement for a university degree, but it doesn't have to be specifically in evaluation. There is a list in your workbook as well of different courses and things. So if you are interested in looking into that a little more, there's some links in your workbook. The reason that you don't have to have a specific evaluation degree, but you do have to have a university degree normally, is that many of the skills that you develop through university are applicable to evaluation. So many of the skills are perhaps fairly general, but quite transferable from other fields into evaluation. So things like critical thinking, analysis, self-reflection, those are all skills that are built through most university degrees, and they're also applicable to the evaluation context. However, because you don't have to have an evaluation degree, there are lots of other options available for building your knowledge. So there's lots of non-university trainings, so things like IPDET, the International Academy for Monitoring and Evaluation. But there's also a lot of less formal options. So there's an abundance of webinars, advisory sessions, forums, conferences are a great place as well, and also joining professional networks. So it's important to note that you don't necessarily need the university degree, but you do need to have a focus on building your evaluation knowledge, but to know that there are multiple ways that you can do this. So one way to do that is by practicing these skills. So experience is really important, even on top of having education, demonstrable experience in education and skill building in that way. You really need to be able to demonstrate that you can use the skills that you have built through education. It also can assist you to identify gaps in your skills, and so that can help you to prioritise what your next steps are in terms of skill building. It also helps you to formalise your skills. So if you are able to say that you have experience implementing an approach, that holds a lot more weight than if you just say that you are familiar with an approach. It also shows that you can adapt your skills and implement in different contexts. And it gives an opportunity for you to use your skills to a professional standard. So you may think that you are really familiar with something that you've learnt through university, but then when you actually come to implementing it in the real world, there can be additional challenges and additional considerations. Another important aspect of building skills and knowledge is around keeping up to date. So we mentioned yesterday about how much evaluation changes, how there's always new knowledge, new approaches, new learning that you can do. So it's really important to keep up to date. There's always opportunities for learning. So you can see down the bottom here that it's really an ongoing cycle of building your skills, learning those, the knowledge, but then new knowledge comes about. So then you have to rebuild and relearn. But it is important to note, as in the first slide, that it doesn't have to be formal learning. So it doesn't mean that you have to go and redo your evaluation degree every couple of years. It means that you can keep your finger on the pulse, identify where these new areas are through webinars, mailing lists, newsletters, those kinds of things, and use those less formal ways to keep up to date. You can also keep up to date based on the skills that you have and the gaps that you've identified and where you want to go. So this is bringing in a little bit of what we learned yesterday. So your ambition in terms of why it is that you want to pursue evaluation may help you to identify which part of the evaluation landscape you want to be in. And then looking at the competencies, you can look at which skills you feel you are very strong on and where you perhaps have some gaps. And so then those gaps can help you to identify exactly where you need to be focusing while you're keeping your knowledge up to date. So along those lines of mapping your strengths and perhaps gaps in your skills, we're going to try and do this in the context of hiring an employee. So in your workbook, there's a very brief job advertisement, and then there's 3 very brief CVs. I think I might have brought it down to 2 CVs actually, so if you can't find 3, that's why. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to get you to read the job advertisement, then read the CVs, and try to think about where each candidate really meets the requirements for the job and where there are gaps in those requirements. And then based on that, you're going to hire somebody based on the candidate who you think has the most strengths and least gaps. So we're going to go into some breakout rooms to do this. And we're going to, I've scheduled 20 minutes, but we will see how we go after about 15. And hopefully you will be able to share your screen in these breakout rooms as well. So you will be able to work through this as a team, but spend a few minutes introducing yourselves. You may be in different breakout rooms to yesterday. So just make sure that you get to know everybody a little bit and then move through to the exercise. Okay, I hope that that is everybody back now. And I hope that you all found that exercise useful. I know it is much easier to do this kind of mapping exercise on somebody else than it is to do it on ourselves, but I think it's a helpful tool to look critically at the skills that are required for the kinds of jobs that you want to apply for, and then where your skills align with those and where you perhaps need to strengthen. And I think that that's a useful tool to be able to prioritise your professional development and your learning going forwards. So I wonder now if I can just quickly go around to the groups and get the final call on who they hired, and also a little bit about why they hired that person. So perhaps if we start with, let's go group 6.
All right. Hi. If anybody else, like from my group, can sort of add on once I'm done, and that's we went with candidate 2. And we decided that is because the candidate, even though the prior candidate had like a lot of good experience, and we were sort of going back and forth about whether PhD experience is like enough value or not. We were all agreed that like, PhD is a very intensive coursework. So yeah, but according to this particular program and what's required, candidate 2 has a more demonstrable experience. I also noticed one thing, that the candidate is from Vietnam, and the program focuses on the South Asian aspect. So I feel like it'll be a better fit in terms of like, understanding the demography, the more cultural nuances which come along with the project. We also saw that the person has demonstrable experience in M&E and other techniques, which is like more hands-on in nature, if I can like put it the best way. But yeah, I think along with research, the hands-on experience sort of coupled well. That's why we went with the second candidate.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's go to group 1 now.
Sorry, Amanda. Actually, I don't know which group I belong to.
You were group 3.
Oh.
Group 1 was, I only noted down a couple of names, but Sabine and Amalia.
And Bernadette.
Thank you.
Was it? I think that was my group, because Sabine was in my group.
Great.
So I think, yes. So we settled for candidate 2 also, even though we felt as a team that they all had considerable educational experience. One had a master's in sociology, that's the PhD candidate, which we felt was a little bit related to development, related, those not specific to international development. And then candidate 2 also had some kind of education in human geography, and had similarly related fields. When it comes to the professional experience, candidate 1 had experience with data collection and research, report writing, and all that, which is quite, I mean, in the same light with what's in there for the tax. But when you look at candidate 2, they have more experience with M&E. I mean, specifically worked 1 year as an M&E officer, has done considerable work with M&E systems and all that. And also there are some 2 peculiar things, like one of them, stakeholder analysis, conducting stakeholder analysis, which was important for the tax. That was being advertised for. And the second one was the fact that he was also managed an M&E database, which was also important for the tax being advertised for. But even though that there were gaps in like development of frameworks like the log frame and other things, but we felt like candidate 2 had the upper hand when it comes to M&E systems. So we felt candidate 2 would be a better choice. And another thing is that they've both done teaching, research assistant and teaching before, so they can easily train people if the need arises. But candidate 2 has an upper hand when it comes to M&E tailored work. So that's basically why we chose candidate 2. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Now, I think between the 2 groups, you've covered most of the main points. So I'm just going to call on each one to see if there's each group to see if there's anything different that you mentioned. So group 5. This
It's
was
the one
Sayan.
with Misha and Akbar.
Yes, thank you. Anybody from group 5? Otherwise, we'll just move on.
Amanda, we almost like agree with whatever the responses has come, but we actually had group breakdown before we could actually, excuse me, get a successful candidate having a majority response to it. But yes, we did understand that both were really very good candidature to the positions. But yes, one conflict which we were having with the candidate one because of the PhD degree, and we were also thinking that whether this degree is at all important to the position which is being hired for, because it was only like a master degree. The requirement was still master degree in international relations. So we were still having that conflict. But yes, for candidate 2, it was sitting very well to the requirement which was asked. Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Now let's call on group 2 if you have anything more to add to what other groups have already said. Group 2 was Alyssa and Gemma. And other people, but
I don't. Okay. Hi. I think yeah. From our group, I think we all agreed that candidate 2 should be hired since she or he has demonstrated experience in monitoring and evaluation, which was not. It seems that it is not present with candidate number 1. Although candidate 1 has relevant experience, it seems that his or her experience is limited in data collection, analysis, and report writing, and not on the development stage of the study, such as the development of logical framework, theory, and data collection tools and mechanisms. But I just noticed that both of the CVs have not presented or identified whether either of the candidates are fluent in English. So I think that's one thing that should be verified by the hiring manager or the recruiter. Thank you.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Alyssa. And I will say that these are not good examples of CVs, so do not make your CV look like this. They were made to be quite short so that I didn't make you read pages and pages. So the language is something that wasn't included that would be included in a real life CV. So good note to point that out. Thank you, Alyssa. And now if we can go to group 4.
One with Dr. Avantika and Ramona.
Hello. We actually I'll make this quick because a lot of our points were already made by other groups. So we also went with candidate number 2. Both of them met a lot of the a lot of the requirements, not all. But then candidate 2 has more focused experience in M&E and also experience in developing tools. Additionally, he's from Asia. We were thinking of his how do you put this? Of how he would probably know the culture better. But that's also a bit debatable because maybe we don't know yet if how much how much Levi knows. And then something else that was mentioned is that the first candidate may have had too much school and needs more on hands-on experience. Though of course the PhD is commendable. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ramona. And last but not least, group 3.
Okay, so I just think most of the points have already been summarized. And then I just want to highlight several key points, not really additional. So in general, we will go for candidate 2, but we need to acknowledge that both candidates cannot really meet 100% of the requirements. However, given the nature of this job, it's about monitoring and evaluation. So candidate 1 may have great research experience, but doesn't mean she may have relevant monitoring and evaluation skills. So that's really like technical skills. And also we feel candidate 2 may have more soft skills. That's also because she has already had experience in project management and also monitoring and evaluation field. So yeah. So does anyone have additional comments? Yeah, that's my.
Hi. I just want to add something, no? Like we pointed out the the requirements that these two candidates have met. But for the case of candidate number 2, and of course also candidate number 1, we noted that they didn't show in their respective CVs whether they have knowledge on major evaluation approaches and shifting trends. So maybe if we hire one of these candidates, those are the things that we need to equip them more to ensure that the gaps have been, to fill in the gaps in their skills. So yeah, thank you, Emily.
Great, thank you, Amy. And that's also something that you would probably delve into in the interview process as well. So if you have these two candidates that meet, 80% of the criteria, you could delve into the 20% that isn't covered and understand if perhaps they do cover it, but it isn't written in their CV. So that would be kind of the next stage of this process. But that's great. From the feedback from all the groups, it looks like we can call them candidate 2 and let them know the good news. They have a new job. So you picked up on most of the points that this exercise was designed to bring out about the balance between education and experience. So a couple of you mentioned that the candidate 1 has a higher level of education, but that perhaps it's not, that doesn't equate to actually having the knowledge that's needed in the context. And so the contextual awareness of candidate 2, the on-the-ground experience and the M&E specific experience are really the key selling points for candidate 2. But you also brought up a couple of good points about the fact that perhaps candidate 1's PhD, perhaps that did involve a lot of M&E instruments, but the way that they have framed it in their CV doesn't demonstrate this. And so you can see through that the importance of tailoring your CV and writing a new application every time for each job to make sure that you are emphasizing the right parts of your skills and knowledge for the role. So that's another important point to come out of this exercise. Okay, I'm just going to get my presentation back. Okay, so I hope that exercise was helpful. As I mentioned, you can do a similar exercise on your own CV, looking at job advertisements. And that way you can prioritize where your next professional development needs to be, and perhaps if you need to take other roles to build those skills. Now, I wanted to quickly touch on this idea of self-awareness. I have this coming up in all of the wrong order. Here we go. So self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character and feeling. So really being able to look internally and being aware of what is inside in terms of character and feeling. And so you can see from the flower diagram here on the left that this internal perspective really is made up of a lot of different things. Values, interests, all of those things come into play there. So why am I mentioning self-awareness? Why is this important? Well, self-awareness helps you to know the extent of your abilities and then to be able to improve upon them. So doing exercises such as the one we just did, but on yourself, really helps increase your self-awareness, be more familiar with where your gaps are, and then to be able to fill those gaps. So which it leads into point 2 there, which is that you're able to identify gaps. It also may help to increase your own confidence. So perhaps you feel like you're still very new to the field, that there's a lot that you don't know. But then when you sit down and methodically actually do a self-assessment, you realize that you do actually know more than you think you know. So that can be a good exercise as well. And then the last point there is that self-awareness can help you to sell your skills. So if you have more confidence in your skills and more confidence in your knowledge, then you're more likely to be able to portray that and be more confident when you're trying to sell these skills and knowledge to employers. So along that line, it's also important to note that your level of self-awareness and the level of your competency changes over time. So things like doing new training courses or having an opportunity to actually practice a new approach, or even not using an approach for a long time. That can impact on how competent you feel or how competent you are in relation to those aspects. So I've got an important note here that maintaining your self-awareness really takes a concerted effort, and you have to regularly revisit these self-assessments to be aware of how your competencies are changing and how your self-awareness is changing. So there is a list of tools in your workbook, and these are specifically based on a couple of competency frameworks. So there's one based on, I think it's the AEA competency framework, and I think there's another one as well. So these are, they take probably 20 or 30 minutes to go through, and they are online quizzes, and so it gets you to really think about the skills involved in each competency domain and gets you to rate yourself along a spectrum. And so that really gets you to think about if you've had experience, if you really feel like you could employ those skills if you had to, and where you may need to improve. So I really recommend going and checking out those resources. Okay, another good use for self-awareness is for networking. So networking is one thing that we hear a lot about in terms of career development, but I don't know, I was a bit kind of like, is networking just talking to people? What does networking mean? So I found a helpful definition here, that networking is establishing and nurturing mutually beneficial long-term relationships with professionals and others related to the field of evaluation. So you can see there that it's about mutually beneficial. So it's not about you just approaching people and taking knowledge, taking connections, taking jobs from them. It's really meant to be more of a two-way exchange. And you can also see that it's with professionals, but it's also with others related to the field of evaluation. So how can we go about networking? Well, you can look within your current organisation and institution. There may be people that you have not connected with, or that you know in passing, but you haven't really connected with. Another way you can do it is to link with your national VOPEs. So these are designed to be professional networks. So they're a lot less intimidating than just cold calling somebody to connect. So they are designed for these kinds of connections, and they can be really important to your professional development. And they can also be really helpful if you come across career challenges, to be able to have a group of people that you can approach with these challenges. You can also link with broader VOPEs and organisations. So the IOCE list of VOPEs that I mentioned yesterday includes both national VOPEs, but also regional and global VOPEs as well. So there may be broader level organisations that you can connect with. You can also look for opportunities outside of formal professional networks. So these may be ones that are not set up as a network, but where you perhaps work with somebody and you really want to maintain contact with them. So really thinking about those opportunities as well. And then the last one here is building an online profile, connecting and being active. So we know that technology and online abilities are becoming increasingly important in most jobs, but it's a really useful tool for networking as well. So you can be active on LinkedIn, you can be active on Twitter, all of these things, but it's one thing to just connect to a lot of organizations. It's another to be active, share posts, share what you're doing, and really be active, which helps you to kind of be at the forefront of people's minds. Okay, I think I covered most of these points already, so I'm just going to skip through these. This is one that I have not talked about, so you can look into the evaluation system specifically in your country. There may be a specific evaluation ministry or department, or there may be high-profile evaluation activities that are being undertaken. You can then look at the people who are involved in those activities and perhaps reach out. And remember to follow up on the connections you've made. So rather than just being a once-off, people are much more likely to remember you and to have you come to mind if they are looking for somebody, if you have followed up on those connections. And the last dot point here is be prepared for networking. So this is where we're really going to delve next. So somewhat like the self-awareness, networking is a skill, and it takes a concerted effort to develop and sustained effort to maintain. So an important part of the networking aspect is to have a clear and succinct statement. So you've probably all heard of an elevator pitch. So the idea is that it's really brief and you're going to be able to deliver it in the time it takes an elevator to go a couple of floors. So it should be really succinct about who you are, what your current role is, why you're passionate about evaluation, what your interests are, and perhaps what you're looking for next. This is a statement that you can really roll out. You can have ready and you can roll it out when you're at any event. But it is important that you can tailor it a little bit to particular events. So if you're talking to someone who is a CEO of a company versus someone who is an M&E officer, you may tailor your elevator pitch slightly. And this comes back to the two-way mutually beneficial aspect of networking, which is to identify ways that you can contribute something to your connection. So remembering that network is a two-way exchange, it may feel like you don't have a lot to contribute yet if you're still at the very early stages of your career, but it may even be just showing an interest in their current work rather than talking about this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm looking for. Really making sure that you're actively listening and giving time for them to also share their current work and interests. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a quick exercise. I apologise, you don't have room for this in your workbook. This is the exercise I added in last night. But we're going to spend about 5 minutes just developing your own elevator pitch, covering those dot points there. And then we're going to split up into groups for about 10 minutes to just give you a chance to practice your elevator pitch out loud so that you are more comfortable saying it in networking situations. So we'll have about 5 minutes now for you to jot out a brief elevator pitch. And then in 5 minutes, we'll put you out into breakout rooms. If you have any questions about the exercise, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat.
Everyone, please stay muted.
Darchan, are we working on the breakout rooms?
It's ready, Umesh.
Okay, we'll just give another minute or so for you to polish off your elevator pitch, and then we'll move to the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Okay, so just before we split into the breakout rooms, we are going to have 10 minutes. We may skip over the introductions of each other because those should be in your elevator pitch. So if you can just go around your table, as it were, in your breakout group and just practice your elevator pitch out loud and then move on to the next person. I'm aware that we may be slightly short on time, so I apologize, but if we can get the breakout rooms happening, and we will see how we go for time. I know that the timing was short, but I hope that most of you were able to practice your pitches, or if not, that you were able to at least hear some other pitches that may have given you ideas for how you can perhaps adapt yours. One thing I would like to note is that a lot of the elevator pitches I was hearing were great, but they were very detailed, which made them relatively long. So this is really designed to be an initial hook to get somebody to talk to you that then you can expand on some of the details around your role and your interests. So one piece of feedback would just be to try and shorten those and keep practicing them as well. You know, sounds corny, but look in the mirror and practice your elevator pitch, and that way you get most confident saying that out loud. Now, I know I'm coming very much to the end of my session, so we are going to speed up a little bit and run through the content quite quickly in this last module. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you actually go about finding opportunities to pursue in a career and evaluation. So a really key thing is build your networks, which is what we were just working on. So maintain your focus there. I already touched on this a little bit as well, but develop an online profile, connect with organizations of interest, and be active around that one. Don't just be a passive member of the online community. Sign up for services. So there are several different services that will send you job alerts and job vacancies. So there's a bit of a list there. You can also sign up for mailing lists. So a lot of VOPAs have mailing lists. The Eval Youth newsletter is also a good way to go about this. There are some specific entry points for the UN system. They have particular programs. And there's also this last one here to identify entry points for consultants specifically. So a lot of the large multilaterals have quite large experience requirements. So look for other consulting opportunities through perhaps Eval Youth or VOPAs or non-government organisations and charities. I also just wanted to build a little on what we were talking about yesterday in terms of some of those key pathways about employee or consultant, broad or specialist. So I just wanted to share some key strategies around being able to shift between those two pathways. So one way that you can do it is really target your professional development. So this comes back to the mapping exercise that we did earlier. Map against the jobs that you are wanting, and then use that to identify where your gaps are and target your professional development in those gaps. You can also join multi-sectoral teams. So you may be able to join as one kind of specialist, but you may be able to learn from a broader range of specialists there as well. It's also really important to remember that sometimes your career progression is not going to be a nice, neat, straight line. That positions that are perhaps not directly in your area of interest can act as a stepping stone to progress in your area of interest. So remember that you may have to kind of step off of your line for a moment in order to be able to progress further. Using your networks is something that we've already talked about as well. In terms of being able to pursue both simultaneously, this is in relation to the employee and consultant pathway. So you may be able to drop an employee part-time and then try and build up a consulting firm. So that's a good approach to shifting between those two pathways. This is the exercise that I just want to introduce briefly, but I am going to give you as homework if that's okay. So you have a framework in your workbook to identify your goals for the short, the medium, and the longer term, and then to really think about what you need to achieve those goals. So this is where you are likely to need to do some research to look at job advertisements that would fit within those goals. Think about the skills and the knowledge and the experience that you need to achieve those. Do that mapping exercise that we did, and think about how you can prioritize your professional development or your volunteer experience to be able to fill those gaps. You may also identify some challenges along the way, so it's important to note those, but also to think about where you are already strong in terms of the goals that you want to achieve, where you already really strongly align with those requirements. And so you can use the framework in your workbook to really write this out and think methodically through it. But as I said, you will likely need to do some research on this as well. I might just come back to questions at the very end. So I'll just do a quick wrap up and then we can come back for questions. So wrapping up everything that we've talked about yesterday and today in terms of building a career in evaluation. It's important to remember that there are two equally important parts of an evaluation career: your technical skills and knowledge, but also having the practical ability to demonstrate that. You can start really at your identified goals. You can then conduct your self-assessments to think about where you strongly align and where there may be gaps. You can then prioritize your professional development and your experience to fill those gaps. You can really capitalize on your strengths. So coming back to one of the real core parts of self-awareness is being able to really be confident in your own skills and then being able to sell those. And so then that process can really help you to follow your interests. On this kind of outside ring, we also have this idea of creating connections, using that to identify opportunities, and then using those opportunities to build your relevant experience. And then through your experience, you can really build your profile. And using that profile, you can then be a very active member of the evaluation community. So that's kind of the cycle that I hope that you feel more confident to pursue, given everything that we've covered in the last 2 days. And of course, to remember that you always have to revisit this. As with evaluation in general, it's an ongoing cycle. So it's a good idea to revisit this fairly regularly. Okay, now I will add back to the questions if there are any.
Yeah. Amanda, I think we'll have to be like really quick with the questions because as a moderator, I have a very tough task of keeping the time. So yes. I mean, I'm very sure there will be a lot of questions, but will it be possible if we come back to you with questions that are unanswered and maybe the participant can get those answers? Sure. We can take one question and we'll then formally conclude this session. So participants can type in the chat box or unmute one question.
Hello.
Yes, go on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the good session. I just need to ask you a favor. If you can share any list or I would say list of the names of the online free trainings for monitoring and evaluation, we can work on that if you have, please.
Sure. I think there is a list in your workbook. So have a look into that. There's a list about online courses.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah. And also we will share that with everyone, right, Amanda?
Yes. So you should all have been able to access the workbook through the link in the chat.
Yeah. We shared that with the group and also that covers a lot. I think how do I thank Amanda? She's one of our own, but it was really, I think, in terms of engagement, the breakout rooms has extremely, I was roaming through breakout rooms and I really saw the engagement with the participants. So thank you so much, Amanda, for taking so much effort on planning the entire 2 sessions so effectively that I enjoyed thoroughly, and I'm very sure the participant enjoyed and learned so much. It will be also great for their career development also. So if you can quickly stop sharing the screen and we'll take a group photo with the entire participants so that we have this as a memory with you, requesting all participants to open their videos so that we can quickly take a photo with Amanda and formally thanking her for these 2 wonderful sessions, very minutely planned so that we all get really pointed focus inputs. Touch and confirm when you get the screenshot. Thank you so much, Amanda. I think what we have now is a couple of minute break, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, quick break. Participants can get water, do some stretch, but we'll try to stick to the timeline. The next session start in 2-3 minutes. And we'll start with the panel discussion. Is that fine? Thank you so much, Amanda. Any parting thoughts do you want to share?
Just to say thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry for cutting into your break time. I really appreciate the engagement and the participation, and I hope that you all stay connected as well. The networks that you've built here are equally important. So thank you, everybody.